Bingo on the dot. So let's go ahead and get started. Thank you guys for all joining us for our extended disc webinar. Today is a 15-minute webinar, and we'll be talking about how disc styles prefer to communicate. My name is Christina Bowser, and I'm the training director here at Extended Disc North America. And joining me today is my awesome colleague, Amy Lipinski, senior trainer at Extended Disc. Hi, Amy.
Hi, Christina.
So we did our sound check. If you guys are just joining us now, make sure the sound is on, of course. We usually don't have time for live questions, so please put them in the Q&A section. And if we don't have time to address it during the seminar, I promise you we'll get back to you after the webinar is over today. It is being recorded, and we will be putting it on our YouTube channel if you search Extended Disc North America, and as well as on our extendeddisc.org, where you will find many recorded webinars if you need to refer back to or just learn more information. So how disc styles prefer to communicate? That's a very broad subject, but hopefully we'll do it in a way to help you at least introduce it in your own disc sessions. One of the things Amy and I like to say first off from the start is most of us think of disc as a communication tool. What are we going to say about that, Amy?
It's not just a communication tool, right? There is a lot more to disc than just communicating. It's going to predict our preferred behaviors. No right or wrong, no judgment in them, right? It's predicting how we prefer to do things. And one of those is going to be our preference in communication. And so that is what we are going to be focusing in on today. So think about it, and I'm sure you've experienced this, Christina, but why is it that there's some people that when I talk to them, it's like I just click, right? I could talk to them for hours. And then there's other people that I talk to and it's like pulling teeth, or they don't understand where I'm coming from, or they don't understand what I'm asking them to do. And I feel like I'm banging my head against the wall, right? And that's how DISC helps us, because it's going to give us information about our own style, how we prefer to communicate, how we prefer to listen. And it's also going to help us understand and learn and appreciate more about styles that might be different from ours and how we can adjust then to improve that interaction with them. We don't want to change anybody. It's just a temporary, brief adjustment so that they hear that message, right? It's going to benefit us both in the end. Anything you would add around our communication topic in DISC?
I think one of the things that Amy and I like to do, as well as some of the other trainers, we like to say that if you think about having a certain language that you are most comfortable speaking with, like whether it's how fast you speak, the pace, whether it's the words you use, whether it's the emotion you put into your words, that's the same thing that helps us, by understanding disc styles. It's much more quicker way to identify someone by their disc styles. If I think, for example, let's move to D styles. When we think about D styles, how do they prefer to communicate? They prefer communication, we jokingly say, to be one direction. I speak, you listen. And it is in part because it is their natural comfort of wanting to be in charge or be in control of that interaction. And if they're speaking, then they are more likely in control. So when we think about these styles are task-oriented styles, meaning they prefer to focus on tasks over, emotions and people. So they're not ones that tend to chit-chat. They're ones that, because they're like to the point and direct, we identify them as being very blunt and direct in their communication. Sometimes we interpret that as a positive thing. Sometimes we may add some negative connotation to it. They also express their opinions as facts, meaning that, you know what, I said it, that's it, no further discussion is needed. They, as I mentioned earlier, they are very comfortable dominating the interaction. They want to be in control. They're very direct. It's very refreshing for some of us to just kind of, push aside all the abstracts and focus in on what needs to be done. But sometimes that's not as comfortable for the rest of us. And because they prefer to speak over listen, they are what we consider an impatient listener. So what do we need to think about when we're communicating with a D style? How do we get our own message heard? We need to think about things like, picking up the pace. They are interested in facts, but they don't want a lot of facts. You want to go right to the executive summary, just bullet points. And then don't frustrate their desire to take action. When you're interacting with a D style, as much as they like to tell you what to do, so we have styles that ask and we have styles that tell. D styles are your tell style, but they don't like to be told. So one thing to remember is give them choices, let them feel that they have control of that interaction. Anything you would add, Amy?
I think the only thing that comes to mind is that there's such the competitive style that sometimes their communication style almost seems as though it's challenging us as well. Just another thing to keep in mind when we think about our Ds. So our I style then, most of us think of our I's as that social butterfly of our styles, right? They're the most talkative of our styles. They prefer to talk. One might think, oh, that means they're the best communicators then. Well, this can't predict that, right? We're only going to predict they like to talk, not how well they're able to communicate their message. And so one thing about their style is they are the eternal optimist. And so they're going to communicate in a very positive tone. They're very inspirational when they speak. And they tend to avoid those unpleasant topics because they don't like to focus in on the negative. They're going to focus on everything that's fun, exciting, and happy. And they're not about the details either, right? So their communication style is going to be more about the fun of an activity, the people that are involved, the people that will be there. And they're also not always direct because they might just kind of talk and people might not understand the, 1, 2, 3 of this is where we're going because they're just talkative. They're not directly getting to the point. And especially if it's an unpleasant point, right? They're going to really beat around the bush with that because they don't like to focus in on those unpleasant points. And they're not our best of listeners because they want to start talking, right? They want to be the ones talking and engaging. And so they don't tend to listen for long. So when we think about tips of how we can best interact with our I styles, really focusing in on the positive is going to be the best communication tip you can do. The other thing that will come in handy is if you really show genuine interest in what they're saying. Be interested in what they have to say and what they're talking about. And that will go a long way with your I styles. Anything else that you would add about our I styles, Christina?
I just have those visions of your I style colleagues running up to you or in our remote learning world, they call you on the phone and they're like, oh my gosh, Amy, I have all these great ideas and blah, 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 and I can't wait to start and blah, 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 what do I think? And, what we don't want to do with an I style is, as Amy said, dampen their enthusiasm. So we want to try to avoid words like no and no, we need to slow down. We need to review it. That's not how it works. I mean, you can almost watch the sparkle and the light just drain out of your I style. Mm-hmm. So it's not that their idea is something that's going to work necessarily, but in order to kind of get them in a effective interaction with you, you need to listen to what they have to say and also just to focus on the positive. So excellent. So let's now talk about our S styles. So you heard us say, this is not about ability. D styles like to talk, I styles like to talk. It doesn't necessarily mean they're the best talkers. It means that they're just more comfortable in that role. Well, your S styles also prefer their communication one direction, but it's flipped. Instead of actually wanting to talk, they actually want to listen to you. They're usually your active listeners. They're going to nod and let you know they hear what you have to say. They're going to want to hear your viewpoints. They're going to talk very calmly. They're trying to build rapport with you. And typically when they do talk, and they usually talk when they're asked a question, they're very amiable, but they prefer to talk about topics that they have mastered. They're the ones that, you know, they might go to like a conference, and they're not going to be the ones that are like, you know, talking to everybody. They're going to kind of seek out those familiar people that they know, and where they can, you know, have one-on-one or familiar group interactions with. They want you to explain things thoroughly. And again, they're listening because they want to hear your perspective, especially when it comes to, you know, making decisions. So when you are interacting with S-styles, here's just a few things for you to remember. Build rapport. Try to connect to them. Try to share as much information as possible. Answer their questions. Slow it down. Give them the perspective of, if you're trying to sell them something, or you're trying to, you know, engage them in something, make sure you talk more from the perspective of the team, or how it benefits not only them, but the people around them, and focus on building trust. Amy, anything you would add?
I think the only additional point I would add is, if there is a big change coming about, if you're able to give them forewarning about it, right? Get them prepared and some time to process and prepare for that change. So when we move into our C styles, they're also on our reserve side. So they tend to be a little more reserved in their communication style. And their preference would probably be mostly written communication versus any type of verbal communication. They want that paper trail. They want all the details, all the facts, right? They're not going to readily express a view that might disagree, because they're going to need time to do their research and get their facts in order before presenting them. They're the ones that are very diplomatic in their approach to communication, very formal and objective, because most of it is really fact-based. And because they're so into those details, we say that sometimes they just get bogged down in them and they lose sight of really that big picture. They're getting into the nitty-gritties and losing sight of really why we're doing something, right? And they also can be that critical listener. And so being able to remember when we are interacting with a C style, you know, if you're sending them an email, proofread it, check it over. So they're able to move past it and move beyond it, right? Give them time to think and process. Don't expect them to respond right away, and provide them as much as possible in writing. It gives them time to go back to it, to remind themselves, what did that say? What were we talking about? And they can go ahead and have more time to process and absorb that information. Anything to add about our C's?
No, you were very thorough, Amy. Just remember, when it comes to the DISC styles and their preferred way of communicating, I think I heard Amy say it, but DISC is not about changing who you are. You know, you're not broken. You're perfectly wonderful the way you are. But it's understanding that your preferred communication style is not necessarily the same as others. And unfortunately, as much as we would like, what we know is we cannot force the other person to make those adjustments. We can only control our half of that interaction. So by making these brief and temporary adjustments, thinking about, again, the tone of your voice, the pace of your, of your speaking, the types of words you use, making those types of brief adjustments in those key moments. Things you can practice, like slowing down, talking more, focusing on results. The end result of all this is that it actually will benefit both sides and maximize the exchange of ideas and information. And isn't that what communication is really about? So thank you guys for joining us. Amy, what do we have coming up?
So coming up, we're going to take a deeper dive into each of our DISC styles and look at each one in a 15-minute webinar around communication and communication tips. So we see on our screen here, next Wednesday, November 18th, from 3 to 3:15 p.m. Central Standard Time, we'll be taking a look at that D communication style specifically. And communication is a broad topic, right? So focusing in on emails, phone, virtual meetings, because communication isn't always in person. So we'll be taking a deeper dive into that, and then our following DISC styles weeks after that. So thank you all for joining us. You can register for our events on our extendedDisc.org in our top right-hand corner and click on our events tab. Please be sure to register even if you can't attend, because we will be recording that webinar as well.
All right, thank you guys all. Have a great, wonderful rest of the day.